The builder design pattern can be used when there are several different products that can be created from an external representation. Typically, this pattern emerges when some complex representation of an object structure is serialized, and several different parts of it can be retrieved later on. In this case, we have an XML document, and an XML document called projects.xml, which looks something like this. It's a list of projects, so each project has a title, a group, tutor, mail, tutor name, tutor mail, department, and also a textual description. Now, for different purposes, we might want to extract different parts of this file. Selected attributes, the textual description, and so on. So we might want to create an email list or a list of pairs, supervisors, and project groups. The way we do this is we can have a central class responsible for reading. In this case, it's called a doc reader. And here we make use of functionality in Java for reading XML files. What we create is this file for reading an XML and converting the nodes in that XML tree into a representation that we can use later on. So when creating this doc reader, the constructor accepts two parameters, a node converter and a file name. So the node converter is something that implements the read project, read supervisor, read email, and read description methods. And if we look at the converters we have, there is an email list converter and a supervisor converter. And they both inherit from an abstract class that provides us with empty implementations. And it's abstract, so we can't by mistake create instances of it. And we have these stubs, so we're not forced to create all methods if we're not interested in all attributes. So when creating an email list, we are only interested in the email related attribute by implementing this method. Now, the way we use our converters is from the central doc reader. So in this case, we have a build method. The build method traverses the nodes in our XML structure. And for all those nodes, we apply the appropriate methods for each attribute and as well as the textual description. So we apply the read project method for the title attribute, the read email method, the tutor mail attribute, and so forth. And depending on what we're interested in, we'll receive different results. So here we'll have to have a complete knowledge of all the node types and their attributes. But the complexity is limited to this class, our document reader. For each auxiliary class, the email list converter, as well as the supervisor converter, they only have single methods that are invoked with the appropriate texts, attributes that they're interested in. And if we look at an example of how this can be used, let's say that we want to create a list of email addresses. So, since we'll have to use an external client that provides an email builder to our document reader, we'll have to know here that we need an email list converter. And after we've built some kind of structure based on the XML file, we must here invoke some email list converter specific method, get email list, to obtain the result. So the document reader is responsible here for invoking the appropriate methods upon encountering email-related node attributes. And it does so in the large build method. But then, to obtain the result, the client must invoke the correct get email list method. And we can use the same document reader with a different converter to obtain a list of supervisors. So the supervisor converter class implements a single method for reading the supervisor names, and after it's been used by the document reader, we can obtain a list of supervisors. So let's see what this does. First, obtain a list of email addresses, and then a list of names of supervisors that correspond to those addresses. The pattern in this case is called the builder design pattern. And a builder, if we look at this diagram, looks something like this. We have our client, which uses the what we would call the document reader and supervisor converter. In the pattern description, the Gang of Four book, our parse test would be a client, and the document reader, which invokes our specific node converters when it builds a structure, is called a director. Director that can be supplied with concrete builders. So, in our case, it might be more appropriate to talk about a document reader because we're concerned with XML documents and reading them. And also, we're not describing the classes that obtain lists of supervisors in email for supervisor list builder, email list builder. We might do that, but it's by no means necessary. So, our document reader contains a reference to the node converter interface. And here we could call this interface a builder interface. We have our supervisor converter and email list converter be the concrete builders. But at the core of this design pattern is a separation of the coordination which takes place in the build method. The coordination where all the appropriate methods related to reading project names, supervisor names, email addresses, and descriptions are invoked as appropriate when encountering the respective attributes and nodes in the XML tree. And also in this case by extracting nodes that match with the name project. The builders in turn are responsible for building some structure and then exposing that structure through appropriate methods that the client can use later. So the get supervisors method is specific to this concrete builder. The get email list specific to this concrete builder, and they don't have to be exposed in the abstract interface that is listed here. So our client has to be aware of how to obtain the results. The director, or the doc reader, as it's called in our case, contains a method for delegating to the actual node converter for managing different node attributes or node textual values, but is not aware of the result when invoking such methods. So the builder design pattern allows us to separate, in this case, traversal of a larger structure, and it's typically structured data format such as XML, where we create an object structure through different means depending on what we're interested in. So these two classes filter out, that is, they only implement certain methods. And we have to be aware of how we can obtain the results afterwards when we use these classes from a client.